Okay, amazing. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm really excited about today's talk. We are talking with Frederike Falke. She's just such a powerhouse in terms of go to market and really a great example of someone who is able to have like a few creative logs in the fire, if you will. She's co-founder of Next Connect AI and creator at Creative AI Lab. And she's held a number of go to market positions as well. She builds AI products and tools across different verticals, SaaS, creative content. She's led go-to-market strategy, post-sales adoption for AI native products and solutions, and she's passionate about this hands-on AI experimentation, philosophy, working on creative applications, driving practical innovations to so sort of a mix between like the business side and maybe more personal creative side. So let me just start by welcoming Frederica. Maybe you want to take a few moments to say hello and introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you already gave me a great introduction, so thanks a lot for that. Yeah, really love building with AI products and like get my hands dirty in that sense. So really excited to be here and very excited to have this talk with you.
And I'm very excited that, first of all, you're local. She's based in New York, and yeah, we sort of alluded to this already, but I do think it's important for people as, because we're women in AI. So we have a lot of folks who are practitioners, who are working, in applied AI positions, people that are excited about the prospect of doing that. So maybe they're, aspiring engineers or AI people, or even in, adjacent fields that maybe they work, the vertical of AI, right? So they're doing other positions within an AI
Hmm.
company, perhaps. So for all those people and more, I think what you're kind of living in your career and in your activities is someone who, okay, it's nice to have the practical side. Obviously, go to market is all about revenue and your target audience and making sure there's a dialogue there, right? People are understanding why it's valuable and why they should get it, right? So the more business side of things, but then as AI people, we're in this kind of era now where so many things are democratized and accessible. And, it's like we don't want to just think with one side of our brain, right? We want to keep something creative going. So I love that you're able to sort of work in both of those areas. How do you approach taking an AI idea from concept to a fully launched product? Maybe let's start with that.
Yeah, I mean that's a big question directly from the start. But like what I normally do is I mean, you could say like from everyday working. So I just work with specific products or I work like in specific idea, like how do you say processes? And at some point while I do these processes, I just realize I'm just repeating things. And I just hate repeating things, right? And then obviously also checking a bit like on the market and seeing, okay, are other people having the same problem that I might have? And then how I do this is that just I build like myself a little small prototype and just see, okay, how easy is it to build it? And I go to now currently I use VS Code and Claude Code. So that's like my base. And I would just go inside and write down like exactly what I'm doing and like all the pain points that I have and say like, okay, is there something with AI? Like, dear AI, here's my kind of starting point. Let's just put this in and see like how it goes and like well we can come up and like automate the process for myself and then I do a bit of testing and always make sure that I almost build it like multi-tenant from the start so I have at least the potential if the MVP goes well and I show it some people that it really works and then basically start building together with them until it is like a fully fledged product and just like bringing in new people and in that way then at some point might launch it so it's like a very iterative process of just taking an idea having an idea and directly build upon it in an iterative way, you could say.
Thank you for sort of breaking it down also to like very practical steps because as you
Yeah.
were talking, I was like, I wonder if Frederica's background is in engineering. And then I was looking at your LinkedIn and it's not. Your background is in
No.
sales, it's in relationship building. I saw like a few like positions like community lead, before go to market specific roles. And so then I was thinking, that's awesome that you're getting your hands dirty and prototyping and trying, Claude Code and Vibe coding and things like that because you're not an engineer. Like you're not coming from it from this like engineering
Mm.
background of like, oh, this is like something I'm used to doing. It's like another reminder of again, like, how accessible these things are now to make a quick idea and whip it up and make an example of it and have a prototype. So I love that.
Yeah, I mean, totally. So I think actually, like, I mean, you can come from engineering and then out of engineering kind of build products and find solution or like find solutions to problems. But I think nowadays, because these tools are so easy, I mean, it's almost you just have a problem and you say, okay, I have a problem, let's automate it and just like reduce my bottleneck or like my frustration. And I feel like, I mean, I came also to AI engineering or like AI building, however you want to call it, right? Because I was like, I was very fascinated by it. And I felt like, okay, it actually can help me to build those systems. But at the same time, I think everyone can do it because I mean, I can also do it. And like now, within a year of like just building and dabbling with it, I can build like full stack applications and also those that are actually going to like to production. And I think you can just do it if you just like start from one problem to the next problem to the next problem and just get better and basically understand the systems. And nowadays you don't need to understand code anymore. You just need to know like how it's kind of wired up together.
No, I love that. And maybe you should be included when we do our next like Women in AI hackathon or something because we do these like once a year and I think you would be like such an awesome judge for something like that. So I'll definitely keep that in mind.
Yeah,
Um
I mean, I'm in.
yeah. And how do you balance like experimentation with creativity, especially where like clients are involved, right? So, okay, it's one thing to have like a fun idea that you want to execute on your own time for your own kind of curiosity. But then, do you feel like you can bring that creative process in when there are client needs that like have to scale?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so because I mean, in the end, what is it if you do it with clients? So, for example, we have like one project we're working with a law firm, and basically what it is to say, okay, they have the whole onboarding process with clients, and it's very similar of like just mixing business like thought process or how you'd say this like very critical thinking of saying, okay, we audit like all of your different processes, and we go like what you would do in a business, right? In a business or customer success, how I did a lot, you would take a workflow and you exactly write down the workflow. And then in these workflows, you say, okay, what kind of pieces do we want to change? And then
Mhm.
obviously you can just plug in a tool, but in the end, you do like A/B testing, right? You figure out, okay, what is the right model to use? What is the
Right.
right structure to use? How do people work with it? Does it work that way? Does it work the other way? So I think combining different skill sets, be it like strategic thinking, like the very logical way of saying, then combining like the building skill in some sense, and then combining like your creativity where you bring in completely new ideas of saying, okay, maybe I heard about these models in my creative kind of projects, or I heard about this kind of human in the loop that, for example, I use with my creative projects a lot, bringing that into the business problems with clients. So I think it's more about like this iterative problem solution or problem solving joined with some planning and some kind of okay, where do we actually stand, where do we want to go to, but then the path might not be linear but might be a bit like iterative.
Yeah.
I think you can definitely bring that in any kind of client projects. And I mean, go to market, especially onboarding client working is it's like to some extent creative anyways because you have to figure it out and you just have to test it.
I couldn't agree more, honestly. I mean, that's the thing. When it comes to yeah, okay, there's a client need, right? And there's certain constraints in terms of how you scale. But the thing about it is like nothing really exists yet. So even iterating, that is a creative process. Like something exists and we have to change it. How are we changing it? Like there isn't already a scaffolding, right?
Yeah, and I sometimes combine it with so I write poetry as well. And so in
Oh,
poetry, right, you write like words, but you try to make them rhyme. And the rhyme or the way of the writing is a constraint within like you write poetry and you have to keep the constraint. And so it's the same with coding or in business, right? You have specific constraints like you have in go to market, you have revenue constraints, right? Like, okay, these are kind of our forecasts, or this is like what we want to achieve in a specific month. And then
Mhm.
based on that, you build your strategy out. And then building, you say, okay, I don't want to like hit my token costs completely over the top, or I don't want to,
Right,
yeah,
right.
have some other kind of guardrails around, or only I want to work with specific tools or specific kind of APIs. And so you kind of build those constraints around it and then say, or like a specific cloud provider, and you say, okay, based on these, I have to build. And because you have specific constraints, you automatically have to be creative.
Otherwise, the bill's going to be quite high.
Yeah, exactly. Or the bill is like super high, or it doesn't do what it wants, or it doesn't
Right.
match like your revenue goals, or it doesn't match like, okay, how is the team constructed? How well is the team like with specific tools? How like how does the
Yeah.
team think? So there are like so many different layers. And so I feel if you just have guardrails automatically, right, or even specific kind of trade-offs between business and tech, then just out of those constraints, you have to become creative.
And
And yeah.
on some level, the experience teaches you too, right? You might not know what those guardrails need to be until you run into a problem, right? Or
I mean, yeah. I just had one. I actually just had one with my creative work because I just created like with 11 labs, like specific voices for characters.
mhm.
And this 11 lab, right, like you pay, I don't know, I paid like $25 or something per month. And
Oh.
then for what I wanted to achieve, however, it would like go to like, I think $1,000 a month. And I was like, no way, I'm not doing that.
Oh.
So I started, like researching and say, okay, this is a guardrail now because I don't want to spend that much and I can't use 11 lab for my voices. So what else exists? Okay, I can go to like Fish AI, it's called, or I can go even deeper the stack and say, okay, maybe there's some open source models that do exactly what I want. And then
Hmm.
how are these open source models? Okay, how do I then split up a GPU, for example? How expensive will that be? Does it make sense to do that? Or does it make more sense to use even another approach? And so in that
Right.
way, you automatically try to find exactly those approaches that work for your work.
Yeah, and I'm interested too to hear more about your work with Creative AI Lab because like one of the questions I had was, sharing a project where AI brought a product or a character, to life, right? But then it's like this question of because you're working on AI projects like through AI Creative Lab. So do you ever run into this issue of like, well, why am I using AI? Or is you using AI through these projects with Creative Lab like just making it easier to use AI because otherwise, it would be another service you'd have to buy or something like that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how does that question of like, why am I using AI here? And is this actually helping the product? Like, when does that sort of enter your mind when you're taking projects on for Creative AI Lab?
Um, Depends on the project itself. So I think like, for example, there's one project where it's like, okay, it needs to have AI
Mm,
because, or I mean, depending how you see it, you could also
mhm.
say it doesn't because there is something, for example, there's one project where it's like my own one. So it's more like almost like goes into a potential founder company or like how do you say, like the shop, an e-commerce company. But the decision was to say, okay, I can have like draw everything by myself with characters, but doing that, nothing really gets out of it. So I need AI because I don't have the skills myself to actually
Sure.
draw like 3D characters in that sense. And so it was obvious that this needs to have an AI because I'm lacking skills.
Hmm.
And without those skills, I will never achieve what I want to achieve. So it was clear it has to be AI. But then there are other projects, right, that more like going to brand building, for example, and building specific text and copy. And you can have AI do everything. But in those projects, it doesn't really I mean, it makes sense to have AI more like give you ideas, but
Hmm.
the least or like the last decision is always a human because we as humans are just better sometimes to come up with ideas that really fit a brand. And it's not like an AI. I just, like you just feel, for example, a text copy and you say like, okay, this is so like AI. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit. So it's almost it's difficult to describe because I think it really depends on like, if you work with someone it depends on like, okay, what skills do they bring to the business and what kind
Hmm.
of skills can they just do way better themselves because they have the context. And I always think in like layers, does AI make sense or not, especially also in these creative endeavors, to say, okay, is there some frustration that you have? And
Hmm.
you do it like consistently all the time, even in creative work, then AI might be a good fit. But in that moment, if you say like some things are just in your mind and you just do them and you kind of unconsciously do it, but you haven't found like a good documentation and way exactly where you say, okay, now I can put AI in, don't use AI because you might lack the data, you might lack the creative angle behind that, and you haven't like formulated it good enough yet to put it into an AI. Um, and so I don't know if that makes sense, but it's kind of saying only use AI if you know like what you automate, if you know the process yourself, and if you really have a bottleneck and you already advanced it to that extent. And if that's not happening, don't use it because you either put like garbage in, garbage out data, you don't have the data yet that you can base it on, or you just don't even know like what you're automating it because you haven't perfected it yet. And then it will never be that good with AI as it could be if you just do it yourself.
I love that. I think that simplifies it so much because as you were saying that, I was thinking, well, in product, we look, at the whole journey the customer's going through, right? As a user journey. So, it's like we're looking for those moments where things are delighting them or things are frustrating them, and where are those drop off periods, right? So I love the concept of, well, figure out what part of it is hard because you don't have the skills, or maybe it causes so much frustration that it's, that's like the part that's worth automating however you can, right? And I think that's such a nice way to put it, because I do think we get a little lost in the sauce, right? Because like marketing
Yeah.
wants to use AI, right? Leadership wants to use AI. And it's like this thing that feels like this is water. Like you should be using AI all the time. And we should be learning tools all the time and learning new things all the time. And it creates this cognitive load in a way, because then you feel like, well, where do I start first, right? And you have to start somewhere first because we are finite beings, right? We can only think about one thing at a time. Like we are humans. So, starting with where is the most frustration or the most lack or the most gap sounds very intuitive to me. And that intuition is very helpful as people are, again, whether they're practitioners or not, it's helpful to have that mentality of like, I don't need to figure it all out and I don't need to think of every possibility. I just need to start with what is the most frustrating, where is the most lack, and then,
Yeah.
organically go from there.
Yeah, I would totally agree because I mean I also obviously had all these mistakes or whatever you want to call it, and just like directly
Yeah.
jump in and say like, oh, let AI do everything for me, right? And then I got stuck because either it was way too much and I got the cognitive overload that you just talked about,
Yeah.
or I just did something and it just didn't work out. It just didn't do anything that it should have done. So, for example, recently it was more an internal project, but I just did like some financial analysis and basically put like data into this database. And it got so out of hand because the AI didn't had like this clean database of like all the numbers. And so
Mhm.
I had to take a step back and say, okay, let's clean it first up and manually go in and exactly understand how the numbers kind of run in these tables and
Mhm.
how I set it up. And only when I understood it like very well myself and did it very well myself couple times, then I was able to then I was able to automate it because I knew exactly what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so I think it's exactly this like kind of step by step by step. And with these little steps, you always make sure that you stay ahead of it and you're not like overrunning with an AI that then
Mhm.
almost you lose control because you just put everything into AI and then it doesn't work as well. And so I think that's
You
also
can't
the reason
justify
why.
it.
Yeah, I know. You can't justify it. You don't know your own guardrails. You don't understand if the AI starts to hallucinate because you just let it loose in a sense. And I mean, some loosening is good for experimentation because it
Mhm.
helps you to kind of just learn deeper and deeper. But for like real product development, I don't think it's
Yeah.
that helpful because, yeah, you lose control and you don't know what it is doing and you don't give it the guardrails that it needs and you can't explain what you're actually doing. And I think that, especially if it moves more to production,
Mhm.
environments, I think is extremely important because then also customers ask like, guys, how can you actually, like make sure that what you build us is
Yeah.
like sustainable? And if this kind of not only return invest from a product perspective and or like product, how do you say, from the like return on invest value
Hmm.
perspective, but also from the
ROI. Yeah.
underlying exactly what ROI,
Yeah.
but also like from the underlying technical infrastructure that is behind that.
Right. Right. And I'm sure you have to sort of sit here in that space, particularly for your work with Next Connect, because you're co-founder of Next Connect too, which is like an AI consultancy, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, I was looking a little bit at the website, and it's about okay, putting AI to work, right? So the implementation, transformation, team training, where there's gaps and things like that, and also building applications. So finding the gaps in the workforce or in the skill set or whatever it might be, but then also applying that gap and filling that gap and producing something, I would imagine.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, what you see, so for example, like some customers, they just say like, oh, I want to have AI. And you say
Hmm.
like, okay, what do you want to have? Like, oh yeah, I heard about this AI brain, right? Like, and I just want to have an AI brain. And then you go in and you say like, hey, let's see what you have. Like kind of doing almost like an audit, right? And say like, okay,
Right.
where do we actually start here? And is AI always the right solution? Because for example, what I just said, like this law case of like onboarding it was kind of like, or like what we are basically doing is like, and how we started was like they said, oh, like we want to onboard our clients more automatically. And
Mhm.
that means like they send out questionnaires to their potential clients, and then clients fill this out, and then they kind of do an interview with them, like a in-person interview, and then they kind of have like the project with the client, you could say. And in this process, they were like, oh, we just need to have it with AI, right? And you realize, or like what we realized is they don't even have the infrastructure on which an AI could lie because their data is everywhere. It's scattered everywhere, right? The
Right.
data is in like a OneDrive with like one person access. And you're like, okay, you're a team. This is even like a security in general problem, but there is no, it doesn't make sense to just spin up an AI if you don't have an infrastructure where you say, okay, I know where the data lives. I know the data is clean. I know like how the data is set up. I know like where my projects live. I know like how it's set up. So we had to, with this audit, kind of first say, okay, we first build like the infrastructure and then afterwards we can build the AI, but then like what's happening. And it's not
Right.
just, okay, let's just do it somewhere and like just hope it doesn't break at some point. So that's like what you see a lot. I think that people just want to go because AI is so hot, right? Like, okay, let's just go everywhere. And then you say like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, you can do this, but let's go back, make sure it really sticks, make sure you really understand what's going on, how your data is set up, and then we can go.
And I feel like there's no shortage. I mean, even on the White Talks, we've talked about this so much. Like, no matter what
Yeah.
the topic is, this will come up, and there's no shortage of like advice about this. And yet, I don't know if you saw, there was like a recent thing where like 6,000 CEOs or something were contributing to this piece about how, okay, like most of their AI initiatives have actually failed in the last whatever since ChatGPT came out, I'm assuming,
Hmm.
or something like that. So, because obviously it's seemingly everywhere and kind of nowhere at the same time, and there's facial recognitions, the things that we don't love to hear about, right? But or even at the Super Bowl, like every ad was about an AI company of some sort. Like people were like,
Yeah.
oh, it seems like we only sell AI now. And I think that's a great point because it kind of, encapsulates this idea that, yeah, AI is everywhere and everyone is selling it, but is anyone actually like showing real productivity gains from it? Because, I mean, obviously it's being used to lay out, as a scapegoat to lay a bunch of people off, but at the same time, are we seeing that promise being delivered? And anyway, according to this piece, it was a resounding no. So my guess is that you have to sort of deal with this problem with clients, right? Of yes, they're excited, everybody's excited. However, only Todd has access to the one Google sheet that has, whatever on it. And if he gets hit by a bus or if that sheet gets deleted or whatever, there's no centralized sort of cleaning process or sifting process that needs to happen. So,
Yeah,
yeah, how do you handle that?
I would say normally, like I just always see it as like a normal, almost project management slash transformation. So whenever, like it's almost like a rollout paired with like a technical implementation.
Hmm.
So it's not that much different than anything else. And it might be, like the boring work, the one like no one likes to talk
Yeah.
about, but it's
Right.
kind of like, okay, we just have a project plan. We first build it up layer by layer by layer, and we just say, okay, first let's say, okay, what do we need to build? Like, what do we need to achieve? What is the transformation you want to achieve? What are the like metrics you want to basically see a result out? And then see,
Hmm.
okay, what is the best step? And obviously, for us, it's mainly building it as well. But obviously, you can also have other steps, right? To say, okay, we just introduce like an AI tool and like we stuck it into your application, also an option, right?
Right.
Or maybe you don't even need AI, you just need like better workflows in the first place. But then if you say like you go the AI route because, okay, there is really like gains that we might see, then it's normally to check out, okay, from a technical level, what do we need to build? Then from a workflow perspective, okay, what exactly where we come from? Where do we go to? And then very importantly, all the like documentation, team, organizational changes, because
Hmm.
if you have a team that is completely anti AI or like very against AI and they don't even want to work with the tools and you don't have like almost, how do you say, we say
Hmm.
sometimes train the trainer or like champions within the company that actually say
Right.
this is a great tool, it doesn't make sense. And then you say you also have to put this organizational aspect in and say, okay, how do we train the team on AI? Because still they need to use AI. They need to use like know like how these workflows change. Okay, how do we have the good documentation so that if someone is not there or just leaves, someone else can just spin it up as well. How do you build
Right.
the system? Do you do like managed services with teams? So I had to say, okay, we manage the AI if something goes wrong. Or do we let like you manage it given you might have the skills. Sometimes they just don't have the skills, so you have to do it. But then they also log
Hmm.
in. So I think it's like almost we have like checklists with all these different topics like security, governance, and so on that just need to be done. And
Right.
then really say, okay, if we put this all together, does it make sense to do the project? Is everyone really in? Are you aware of the
Right.
costs? Are you aware of like really sticking with it and the momentum? Or if
Hmm.
it's just like too much in that moment and it might be not the right time to do it, but then obviously they're like, okay, we have AI FOMO, right? Like let's do it. But there is like it's not all. I think the technical part is a very small piece. The
Hmm.
biggest piece is actually, okay, is the company really committed to make that change, and are they willing to really clearly work together on this journey? And that's like
Right.
not the fun journey. It can be fun in the small pieces, but it's a lot of just normal kind of almost product rollout, you could say, and make that work.
Hmm. Yeah, because they must be, I mean, obviously, not even your costs, right? It's like if you're going to centralize your data or you need a more advanced database or a data schema or however you're going to decide to uh, get things ready or build pipelines to keep things ready or whatever it might be, right? That means they have to invest. They have to invest in architecture and the hours of their engineers who will build that work, presumably if they are going to go all in.
Yeah.
So that those are the costs you're talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of, I don't know, how do you say, like a cost analysis or like make a case, right? Make
Right.
a business
Hmm.
case for exactly what we want to achieve and
Hmm.
saying, okay, how much does it cost right now? Like, what would be the benefits if we move it to AI? What will be the cost for AI? What kind of AI models do we use? What kind of like token cost will we have? What kind of or APIs, whatever. So just putting this all in perspective and saying, okay, given all of those different criteria, is it worth
Right.
it? Or is it something that we might just change something in organizational setup or like workflows and just train the team in a completely different way and an AI is not necessarily needed? So
Yeah.
it's like this initial audit to make sure, okay, we cover everything to figure out, okay, is this like the right move or is it not the right move? And is the company
Mhm.
ready for it right now? Or might there be some layout work first or some other work that needs to be done to really make that step successful?
And my guess is because this was a problem before too, like
Yeah, I
before
know.
transformer models and stuff, And my guess is that like now, you know, I mean, I guess that's why everything's a chat GPT wrapper, at the end of the day these days, because you still have the same issue you had before, which is if you're gonna use modeling and you're gonna that machine learning, like if you're gonna use traditional machine learning models, you're going to have to get your data right because all models are imperfect and all data is imperfect. So eh, the limit does not exist, right? Of like how perfect can it all be, right? So there's always going to be a gap. And then how do you reconcile that gap? And that's where, like, okay, performance metrics, you agree on what is good enough, right? And whatever, and you go from there.
Mhm.
My guess is like there's a lot of resistance to that, right? So if the simple way to incorporate AI is here's a chatbot, here's onboarding help, or here's knowledge base, or whatever, right? But it's essentially you're using an LLM to specialize it with certain information. That is the lighthearted, the light touch approach, because that won't require you to do all this hard work, fine tooth comb through your data kind of work. So does that create a conflict? Like when you're approaching certain projects with clients, like, um, okay, maybe there's this go-to-market pressure, right, to incorporate AI, and this is a low
Mhm.
cost way of doing it. Is that come up a lot for you?
Yeah, I mean, it does come up. I
Yeah.
mean, it is this thing like, okay, why don't I just use like an AI model or like chatbot, right? And like just do like one little task there and one little task there. And I say like, yeah, I mean, this is a great thing. You can do this too. And we sometimes do that too, of like just more like a training perspective.
Yeah.
So not necessarily like an integration, but more like, okay,
Mhm.
okay, if you want to go this route, do it in the first place and do it as long as it works. And then
Mhm.
you can go another route,
Mhm.
because sometimes, okay, if someone is not ready to go like a longer route, I mean, it's firstly costly, obviously. It is like it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of resources, right? And so, I
Mhm.
mean, we are trying to still, obviously, from a like more sales perspective, right? Saying, okay, it makes more sense because you build like the whole infrastructure to then put AI and then you see like a bit of changes. But if someone is not willing to do it,
Right.
it doesn't really make necessarily sense to force them because you just increase the likelihood that these projects will fail just
Yeah.
because no one is really into it. And then like it just, like a little of an AI kind of, okay, I use an AI bot and I just go, okay, how do I write better emails? Or how do I kind of just post
Mhm.
something automatically? Or how do I kind
Yeah.
of solve this problem with an AI bot, or like, like
Mhm.
in that sense, can also be a solution because it might be helpful in like these small little projects and processes, right? And it gets you like more aligned to an AI to understand, okay, how does an AI actually tick? How do I prompt an AI? How do I
Mhm.
like build context about it? But then often you see, especially for like more corporates or like companies that are really like enterprise customers, for example, they need like security, they need to make sure that their
Yeah.
data is safe, they make sure
Mhm.
that their data is not just like, yeah, basically trained on. Um,
Mhm.
and they need more like a cloud setup, or like a even like on-prem, depending on like how secure the data needs to be.
Mhm.
For these companies, we often not advise it because I mean they just potentially just put all of their data into like a model.
Right.
Um, but then yeah, they often, how do you say, like they hit bottlenecks then rather quickly soon because then you just for your own role, for your own person, everyone sets up their own AI. And I think I
Right.
was at an event recently and they said like, oh, we just gave like AI models, like for our whole team. And basically we had a, how do you say, an invoice of like I think it wasn't even it was like 500 million or something. I don't know if you heard about it, but
I
like
I heard about
totally
something like
crazy.
this. Maybe it was the same thing, but yeah, like they didn't realize to put a limit
Yeah,
on the
exactly.
on the tokens, right?
And then yeah, and everyone just does everything, right? And like I also heard this, and I see this also, that if you just use an AI or like an
Mhm.
AI bot, people start to sometimes use AI for like everything. And
Mhm.
because you're not like, if you're not really thinking about like what you're doing and why you're using it, you
Right.
put everything into an AI. And then the output is like, you can't control any output because everyone is just using their AI models for
Right.
everything. And it might be helpful, but you might also, how do you say, you have a problem sometimes with your culture and like your brand that you're
Mhm.
sending out, because people are not like thinking so much about what they're doing, but they're just like using AI for everything.
More and more. Yeah.
And especially in client work, for example, or sometimes with go to market, when you talk to customers and you don't even, for example, can't talk to customers anymore because you say, oh, let's just use the AI for this,
Right.
then
Right.
you basically lose quality in your work. And so
Hmm.
it's not always as helpful if everyone does it and there is no like structured approach behind it.
And I wonder too about the post sales, customer success when it comes to like AI native products and obviously in this case we mean products that are built with some AI functionality, right, natively
Mm-hmm.
into the product itself. So because we're talking about chatbots now and I would say for things like onboarding or like pushing a customer, through that journey that they're going on or giving them reminders or asking for feedback. Like those can all be like great ways to use something like a chat bot because you have a way to get qualitative data from clients, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then there must be a limit to that, right? So how do you approach that post-sales customer success side of things when it comes to AI products?
I mean, I think it depends a bit. And the interesting thing is, especially in AI native companies, what you often see, products are extremely AI native, but the go-to-market systems are not yet. And
Mm,
so a lot of people, especially in go-to-market, right, because they're so non-AI native, because they're mainly focused on client work, they just use some
mm,
AI chatbots, which works for individual work sometimes. But then what normally, and that's also, like what we do is to say, okay, kind of you take the go-to-market systems and you have someone like a go-to-market engineer or like growth engineer or like revenue operations, and you
mm,
look, okay, what is every kind of seller doing with their AI bots that actually you could automate in the system. And you could say, okay, if every like every seller or every customer success manager, they say like, okay, we are just let them write the emails, or we like want to have like we move data from this kind of AI tool, or like kind of how do you say account scorer, so like finding out, okay, what might be the leads you want to connect to, then this
mm,
is something
mm.
that you should build internally as a system
Like business development.
automatically, kind of that you help, for example, the business development team to build the underlying infrastructure for them. And it doesn't even need to
Mhm,
be code, right? It could be just, okay, we connect all these different data points and we just score them up and we send this data back to you so that you have the right data. So it's normally about similar processes, like, yeah, with building products to say, okay, where are the biggest bottlenecks in the team? And
right.
then this becomes like a go-to-market system. And then they
Mm,
can still use like small AI bots, whatever, if they want to use it for like help them in like their day-to-day. But at least
yeah.
all the systems are already like set up. So they just get the right information at the right time for them. And then they
Hmm.
can do it themselves. And so I think, especially with go-to-market, there is this kind of moving target where you say like, okay, AI really helps for like automated outreach, for example, automated outreach sequences, automated kind of lead scoring, for example, as I just described. But then there's always this path where you shouldn't use AI, which is just
Right.
like people relationships, going to
Hmm.
events, like reaching out and connecting. And AI does it to some extent good, but there's always this layer where you can send automated messages with AI all the way, and you
And no
have
one's
a
gonna read
success
them.
rate, which is, yeah, no one reads it because it's too automated and too AI. And then you just go to a room and you have like some potential
Hmm.
clients there and you make a deal. So AI is more the kind of cut the frustrating admin work and operations, but then for the real like trigger and real understanding like the context, okay, how are people connected, whom do I know in this company, how can I know the other person? AI can give you and nudge you ideas, but the actual work, especially the more you move into enterprise, is still like you need to build relationships, and that's still like we can't
Hmm.
automate everything. So I think especially in go to market, and especially the higher you move with like companies, you need to
Yeah.
know these companies, you need to know the right people, you need to know how you can kind of talk
Hmm.
to people, connect people to other people, and just build your networks and build your relationships. And that's something that I feel is, especially in that field, at some point it just hits like a threshold.
No, and I love that because I think a lot of well, we're not hiring right now. AI was being used for a lot of like why companies are downsizing or freezing hiring or things like that. My feeling personally is that obviously that's not true because we know that AI can't replace the work of real people because we
No.
know how hard it is to set up AI systems, keep them going, keep them good. So the idea that we're doing that to the level of sophistication that we would require to replace like an actual human mind is like honestly very funny. But I think what's going on is again, this has happened, and now we're standing on the other 18 months of that decision looking back, and companies are communicating this, and we're really creating the culture around this if you think about it, right? Because like at the beginning, it's like, okay, it's the Wild West. Nobody really knows anything. People are just saying stuff. Feels
Hmm.
good to say it, and that's enough, right? But then real life happens, real constraints happen. Uh, Projects are under-delivered, expectations are crushed. There's a disillusionment period, right? And then we get into like really a crystallizing of culture, and that's I think where you're like in a very unique position, right? Because you can sort of speak to these things and see how they've failed. Because with AI at this point, it's like, well, if you can convince me that it's AI, you're using it wrong, basically, is where we're at, right?
Hmm.
We still want to connect. Customers still want to talk to a human when they're frustrated, or they still want to, have a personal relationship, even if you have a product-led, product experience where you're not talking to anybody. But at some point, yeah, there has to be something like more authentic that's being heard and understood and synthesized by the company. So I love that note about use it again, so what we were saying before, use it for the frustrating parts of a person's job, use it for helping, the really hard things that like we don't want to like do I want to look at a list of leads and decide which one is the, one we should go for? Like if there's an automated way of doing that, then that cuts like a human's work, right? And they can spend that time focused on things that are really going to move the needle, so to speak, right? Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I just love all those ideas. And then as far as like go to market strategies, like what works well for AI tools, like across industries or geographies. What go to market strategies do you feel like are most successful with AI native products?
Okay, that is like a really big different field, and it depends on
Okay.
on the companies, but and the
Okay.
products. But interestingly, so I think it's more so. I mean, I actually recently read like okay, go to market trends 2026. Like, what are we seeing in these different companies? And I think it is exactly that mixture, right? So there is like okay, some run like ads. Sometimes you run like, for example, Facebook ads. I know like one company in Germany that I worked for or like worked with better, and they would just run Facebook ads because they know like their clients are in Facebook, and so they would just like completely run that. Then others, okay, we
Mhm.
just use AI for our sequences. But I think what
Mhm.
I see to some extent is exactly this: you kind of automate the crunch work in a sense, and you
Mhm.
automate the sequences, and you automate, okay, let's just send out messages and kind of almost iterate and see like what kind of
Mhm.
message that we are sending out fits the best with the right buyer. So basically the avatars that we are building and the ICP that we are building to, yeah, grow our products, find the customers. But then because obviously everything becomes AI, and you have
Mhm.
like these outreach agents, you have like the kind of messaging agents, you have like everything, these agents, there is this part where relationships become so much more important. So if, for example,
Mhm.
startups, like you sit together with other startup founders or like, yeah, startup kind of VPs and growth leaders and sales leaders in a
Mhm.
room, there is a higher likelihood that you will just like buy some from someone that is in that same room because you trust this person more. So almost
Right.
like relationships almost become more important and events. So you see like, all these tech companies hiring community leads, hiring growth engineers, hiring these people that actually are able to do events and sponsorship and bring the right people in the right rooms. Because you meet someone in person, and if you heard, like, I don't know, same product or almost similar product, similar theme, right? And you get 10 AI agents that send out messages versus one person
Hmm.
sitting with you in the room, to whom do you decide?
Right.
Very likely the person that is in the room. And so it's almost with AI, we are seeing more people, or like more in-person sales to some extent, because you need to build trust somehow. And then all the operations, everything is AI, but still to see, okay, where do I find these right people that I can just like come together, works actually really well.
Hmm.
Um, so it's almost counterintuitive, but at the same time, not really, because if everyone does AI in the digital space, in a B2B context, I mean, B2C might be a bit different, but like in a B2B context,
Hmm.
then
Hmm.
coming together in person becomes more important, because how do I differentiate as a buyer to say, okay, which kind of product do I buy if like all these products already exist? And then, yeah, so obviously there are some other, like options that you can do. You can run ads, you can get like your certificate, like you're a leader in your category. You can have all of these great logos. I mean, that's something that always kind of strives. But at the
Hmm.
same time, especially in early stage, it's like super helpful if you just be in the same room and almost grow together, like these 10, 20, 30, like companies that come together and say, okay, I buy from you, you buy from me. Okay, great, we can grow together.
Right. Well, and I was thinking about the Meta glasses as you were talking about this example. Because yeah, the trust thing is, I think, will continue to be um, an area of focus in terms of what we can trust AI to do, and also uh, customers, users trusting companies with all that data. Because I don't know if you saw, but Meta had launched these like Ray-Ban glasses,
Yeah, I
and
saw them.
they were struggling with women wanting to wear them, and so then they did this collab with one of the Jenners, I forget. Anyway, they did a collaboration with someone pretty famous, and
Hmm.
she made these like more feminine, Meta glasses. And I was just like looking through the comments of these videos when I was looking through it, and everyone's just like, I'm not wearing those. Like, why would I wear those? Why would I trust
Hmm.
Meta with a constant recording of my life? Like, are you serious?
Hmm.
And so, and obviously now, because we're talking more B2B context, but even B2C context, I mean, it's like so much to trust a company with. And then in B2B
Hmm.
context, of course, consumers are thinking about it like personal safety, security, right? Okay, that's like important. But B2B context, you're thinking about, oh, like how am I gonna again defend this decision or defend um buying something from another company knowing that I have to answer to my leadership team or board or whatever it might be. So yeah, I think this issue of trust just like is going to keep coming up, and more companies are going to keep getting it wrong until we have a culture around how do we communicate that we can be trusted with this and this capability.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, also, can you grow with the team, right? Can you grow with the company? Do you trust them in the data? And then one thing maybe I forgot, which is not so much the trust, but still, I mean, to some extent, trust maybe, because we're trusting AI models like way more, right? And like everyone is just, instead of Googling something and like trusting maybe a
Hmm.
blog or something, we just
Right.
trust in AI because Gemini is into Google, Claude is into, like, you just type something into
Hmm.
Claude or in DeepSeek or whatever, Perplexity. And I mean, those
Hmm.
AI models also doing how do you say, market research for you, or like product research. So
Right.
the
Mhm.
all these like geo or like generative search optimizations and like AI model
Mhm.
optimizations, I think also becomes so much more important. So if I, like make a buying decision more on a developer context, maybe, or like what kind of frameworks, what kind of AI models do I want to buy or use? I just go to an AI and ask an AI. So the
Mhm.
AI, basically the recommendations that an AI give me in form of, okay, what are the right products and tools that I should use for my use case, becomes
Right.
the new search and the new, okay, I trust an AI model, and maybe more in Anthropics and OpenAI or vice versa or whatever, like what people preferences are. because I trust those companies or leaders, then I trust the AI model. And because the AI model gives me recommendations, I trust those results so much more than maybe a Google result. And so I think the personal trust, super important, but then
Mm,
also these, okay, how do I actually optimize my product and my searchability for like an AI model and AI agents, and especially when they do automatic activities or autonomous agent
right.
activities, it
Mm.
becomes like so much more important as well.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that report. I was just looking at some numbers, and they were saying that there's an increase of uh oh, so they said okay, they had 14,000 workers in 19 countries. So just to give the breadth
Mm-hmm.
of this feedback. So 14,000 workers in 19 countries said that their regular use of AI as a worker increased 13% in 2025, but their confidence in the technology's like utility fell 18%. So it's like even workers themselves, maybe they're using it more, but there is a persistent distrust in what they're getting from it. And so again, it becomes this conversation of like, well, how do we implement it and how much like even if they give us something, we have to validate it with a Google search probably, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay. Um yeah,
I mean,
I don't
I
know. It's
mean,
sobering. It's definitely sobering. We're going into the second phase now of like not just like, oh, it's gonna help no matter what. It's like we're seeing where those drawbacks are, where those limitations are in a sobering way, which is good.
yeah, I mean, I think it's good because I mean, all this experimentation and just like jumping into it. Obviously,
Mm,
everyone is excited, everyone want to do it. But
mm,
I also see like, yeah, you have to be careful about that you're not just AI-ifying everything, right? Because you
mhm,
still have a normal life in that sense, and you still have like
mhm,
relationships and you still have your work. And sometimes in AI, especially as I said before, right, if you just like randomly just try to optimize for an AI and say, okay, I do something that let's just use an AI and even
mhm.
put the AI as like the, how do you say, as the goal or the objective. And I think that never goes well. So it's
Yeah,
more like the objective is, okay, what do I want to do better? Or like, how does it might help me? And then, and I think a lot of people then just use AI also and just say, oh, it doesn't work. I just use it one time. It doesn't do it work. So I
right.
stop.
Mhm,
But it's not to
mhm,
say, oh, there is so much more, right? Like maybe I need to prompt it
mhm.
differently. Maybe I need to give it guardrails. Maybe I need to do this
Give
and
it
that.
another
Or maybe
job. Hmm.
exactly. Or maybe even the problem is completely wrong because I don't
Hmm.
even know like what I'm actually optimizing for here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
I think that that kind of yeah leads to a lot of problems. And it's not necessarily always the AI that's the problem, but more how do we approach the problem or like what problem do we even solve?
Right. And when I first looked at it, and by the way, I just want to give a little context around it because it was well, maybe I'll link it in the oh, sorry, I don't have it. Ugh. I wanted to say
All
the
good.
actual name of the organization. Okay, the National Bureau of Economic Research.
Mm-hmm,
So they it's a study that they published last month.
mm-hmm,
So I'll
mm-hmm.
link that and we'll include it as a resource on this. But anyway, when I was looking at that, I was like, A, not surprised that they were saying, the gains we thought we were going to make have actually not materialized. I'm not surprised, but I also my takeaway from it isn't, oh, see, AI doesn't work. It's clearly we're still so early in figuring out what works and doesn't work that we're still highly inefficient when it comes to applying AI and finding that sweet spot. And then in the context of go to market and B2B, products, it's the issue of scaling it. Like, okay, fine, maybe you find an application that works, maybe you implement it into your product, or maybe you're just vibe coding with it or whatever it might be, right? But then how do you scale that into production, and how do you create systems around what's actually going live, right? That's like really the thing. It's like, okay, it's nice to build a prototype and spend a lot of time and energy on it. That's cool. We love a fully formed project. But then can you replicate that in time and space, right? Consistently.
I mean, totally. And I don't know if you saw this, but they're like right now on LinkedIn, a lot of those images where you have, okay, this is what people think vibe coding is, or
Mm.
like
Yeah.
coding and product development and
Yeah.
what it actually is.
Mm.
And so you see like vibe coding is, okay, I built like a kind of product prototype and I think about it for like 2 days or something. And then
Mm.
if you see, okay, what it actually is, it's like 14 to 16 different slices of data and decisions that have to go into like a full product.
Right.
So it is really always to think about, okay, if I just want to experiment, okay, I can build like a prototype in 2 days and I don't even need to code at all. I
Mhm.
just let an AI code. But if I really want to build it to production, there is way more behind this. And I think this goes back, right? Like, okay, we can all try AI agents or like AI, I mean, more like tools or like models, easy peasy. But if you want to do this like in production, it's more
Mhm.
like the decision, okay, what do I want to get out of it? What are the
Right.
costs to actually get there? And
Mhm.
is that really something I want to do? Or do I maybe just keep it as a prototype and just tingle around a bit and see, okay, maybe, like maybe I find someone who likes it and then we can build it together at that point. Or does it really make sense for the business? Or is it more like, okay, we just thought like, okay, it's fun, it sounds cool.
Which again goes back to the wisdom of what we were talking earlier in the talk, which is focus on what's really a problem first, what's really
Yeah.
an area of frustration, for your clients too, like again, whether it's internal, so like you're using it with employees, you're using it to, help lubricate teams or sharing information, knowledge between teams. Same thing with clients, and that's where you don't, okay, the technology is advancing and that's great. And we could theoretically find a lot of gains there. But you can't like shortcut your way around understanding customer pain points. Like that's still front and center of what you're building or what you're hoping to build as a solution, right, for someone, even if it's not about a customer, it's about the need and the market, right? But again, that comes from um a human frustration. There's no shortcut around that, like.
I think for production not. I mean obviously you can just build something and hope, let's see. But for like if you I mean it takes time to build that. It's still I mean AI agents are super good, right? But and they get better like every single time. So I mean, since I
Yeah.
do like the AI coding, if I just look back at these first AI agents and now to them how they are now, they're like so good, but it's still something I think when you see it like the vibe coding and so on, you just think like, oh, I just take 2 days and I have like a running product. And
Hmm.
that's not the case.
Right.
So if it really want to go, it just needs like time. So I think this like pre-thinking about it, what you actually want to achieve and like why you want to achieve it is still something that is super helpful to know and to understand. And as to your point, right? Like, okay, what exactly, and a customer can also be an internal team.
Hmm.
So whoever it
Hmm.
is to say, okay, what is really your problem? And is this problem really like so deep that we need to have an AI agent doing it for you? Or is this maybe even a
Hmm.
problem that doesn't even need an AI agent because you just need to, I don't know, you need a sales training as an example, and then you're just better in your sales and you don't need like an AI agent that you
Yeah.
completely complexly build to just give
Hmm.
you some coaching in your call. You just need like, for example, better skills of like how you're leading a call.
Right. Right. Yeah. And which is again supplementing your human skills like more than anything else. Because a lot of
Yeah.
just to go to the career like part of this talk, because again, I think the way you're approaching this and the way you're approaching your own work is just so astute. You have your own expressions of how you're involved with AI at a personal level, professional level, combination of the two, right? With starting your own businesses and things like that. Um, so what advice would you have, if you're talking to people who are still haven't broken into the AI space or want to get into AI products, building or creative experiments or yeah, what advice do you have for them if they still feel like it's
I
outside?
just have, I think the internet connection is a bit bad, but I hope you hear me.
We hear you. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay, so I don't know. I don't know. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, let just you're frozen. So let
Okay.
me just click my video off. And then I can just talk on that one.
Okay.
So I think you wanted to say like career advice, right? Like what is the advice for someone breaking into it?
Yeah, if they still feel
I
like
mean,
they're
I would give,
outside.
oh, sorry. Okay, so I'm I'm not sure. Sorry, like the audio is bad. Um, but so from a career perspective, so I think I mean I just started. I think a lot how we talked about it, right? Like okay, solving a problem. So I started in that way. So I first used Lovable for like more the coding perspective, then Cursor, and then like Cloud Code and VS Code right now. And I was just like, okay, I have a problem. So I would just start solving one problem and then like a more difficult problem, more difficult problem, more difficult problem,
Mm,
and just learn a lot of like what happens in the industry and really knowing like how you can solve your problems with AI. And then you learn like what works well, what doesn't work so well, and go from there.
yeah. Yeah, I like that. Again, it condenses everything into something much more manageable and less overwhelming. And then when it comes to Creative AI Lab or probably not Next Connect, but
I'm
well,
so
I
sorry.
shouldn't
I
say.
have really bad
Oh, do you
audio.
not hear me? You don't hear me?
Now I hear you. Now it works better.
Okay, can we try with you on video on just to have it?
Sure.
Okay. Because I mean from my side you're fine. I don't hear anything wrong. You're not glitching or anything like that.
Oh,
Just
interesting. Yeah,
just
I have glitches on your audio, but let's make it
okay.
work. Let's see.
Well, last question would be yeah, I mean when it comes to like Next Connect or Creative AI, is this something that if people want to get involved with, like let's say someone from Women in AI, could they get involved or help with projects or is it like pretty closed for now?
Can you repeat your question? I'm very sorry.
It's okay. If you with Next Connect or Creative AI, both can you hear that? No. Okay. Let's just stop here. Thank you so much, Frederica. And then yeah, I'll you can't hear me at all, right?
I don't know, like
Okay.
it's a really
I'm just gonna say
bad
thank
connection. So I
you
hear
and
you,
then
but I
we'll
don't
end
hear you
it.
really well.
Okay, no worries. Thank you so much, Frederica. I'm gonna stop the recording here.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, bye.